Hi, I'm Richard Hawke, Director of Ornamental Plant Research at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Welcome to one of our trial gardens. This is our full sun trial garden. Right now we're standing in the Agastache or hyssop trial. This year we started this trial. It's a 3-year trial. We are looking at the Agastaches as annuals. They are perennial plants, but we're looking at them as annuals. So we've grown out the plants this year. We have 48 different types. And next year, after we've assessed whether they're how much winter energy, whether they're even alive, we will replant them. Right now in production, on our production facilities, we are propagating next year's plants, and then this time next year we'll be doing the same thing for 2027. So in the end, we'll have 3 good years worth of trial because there's no 2 seasons in Chicago alike, especially from year to year. So the Chicago Botanic Garden trials started in 1982. I came to the garden in 1985, and at that time our trials were just internal. We really just were looking at plants that would do well in the Chicago area because we were building all these display gardens. We had three, maybe 4 when I came on, and there's now 28. So we're trying to get all this brand new stuff into the display gardens. So it was pretty shortly after that, by 87, I realized we were not keeping up. Our trials run about 4 years for perennials, 6 years for shrubs and vines. And that's too long of a period for us, how quickly these gardens were being developed. So it was that point that we turned to be primarily an external audience. And we still work with our curators and our horticulturists, but we really are we're trying to focus on getting our information out to the general gardening public as well as the green industry. So that is our mission, is really to evaluate plants, figure out what's the best plants for the Chicago area and areas of similar climatic conditions, and then report on that. We do that a number of ways, through publication, through lectures, through videos like this. As a contributing editor of Fine Gardening magazine, we do publish a lot in fine gardening, and that gets our information and all that plant knowledge that we've acquired over the last 40 plus years, out to the general gardening audience. So when we're doing a trial, we are looking at 4 main criteria. We're looking at their adaptability to the conditions we're growing them in. So for instance, with this Burnett trial, the Sanguisorba, we're looking at how they do in this full sun, clay-based soil, sometimes a little too moist, and a lot of wind. So that's the main thing, how adaptable they are. Secondly, we're looking at disease and pest issues. For the most part, the only real pests we see out here, minimal damage from Japanese beetles and some deer browsing of the flowers later in the season. We're looking at winter hardiness, if they survive here. And then I think the most important thing that people are really interested in is, what do they look like? What are its flowers? When do they flower? What color? What size? The length of the bloom period. We're looking at the foliage, the health of the foliage, the quality of the habit. Is it upright or is it splayed open because of the wind or because of the heaviness of the inflorescences? And we're looking at everything related to what that plant looks like. So when you're looking at this kind of collection, where our comparative trials are our main focus here, you're looking at all these different types. Some are very similar, some are quite different, and that's part of the trial process, is to sort of bet one against the other, which is the better. If they're 1 for 1, that's a great thing. But here you've got one that's got this wonderful sort of magenta, deep rosy magenta flowers that are very, very long and sort of drooping, whereas you've got this one much shorter with a very upright, and that will always stay upright, and may or may not, not a smell I like. kind of smells like the Chinese tree of heaven. So these are the kind of things, and we're looking at leaves that are very fine textured. Some are bigger, but they're all pinnately compound, which means they look sort of like a feather. And again, we look at these a perennial for 4 years minimum. We think that's a good amount of time that they're doing well. And then we have here some with really extravagant inflorescences. The downside to these can be that if they get saturated with water, they will pull down. And if they pull down, they might not stand back up again, even if they dry out. But you can see the quality of that foliage versus the quality of this foliage. Very different, shiny, a little more matte, blue-green here. Well, we're now in our new shade evaluation garden. The shade will come on as the plants grow. We've decided to go with all natural shade, so the trees will have to reach a certain size to really to make this a true shade garden. But for now, we have pockets of shade. We have pockets of full sun. It really depends on where you are in the garden. So what we've done is we've selected plants that will tolerate a lot of sun, but actually are often considered more shade-loving plants. Things like this hydrangea arborescens cultivar, cultivars. We have hibiscus syriacus cultivars, which are full sun plants. But then we've got things like pulmonarias and bergenias and hellebores that are all sort of shade-loving plants, but actually tolerate a lot more sun than people think. But this garden differs not only in having the shade, but in having a engineered soil. The other trial garden is it's not a natural clay base. It's what was created when we first built that garden in 1989. This garden opened in 2022, and the soil in here has got a lot more inorganic matter, sand and whatnot in it, and less organic matter, which has actually promoted good growth on the plants. It's not quite the soil that the average person might have in their garden, so that's a story we need to tell. And one of the aspects of our trials, all our trials, is to tell exactly what we saw with all the background. So that's going to become a big part of the story we tell of how the plants did here. The other way this garden differs from the full sun garden is this garden is not laid out in rows. That garden has pretty much everything that's like another right next to each other in rows. This one is laid out over the whole, laid out over the whole length of this long, skinny garden. So make a comparison with this hydrangea, for instance, with one that's, 300 feet down there is a little tougher. And that's where our data collection comes in and our photography. We can photograph a picture of this. It's attached to the code, the evaluation code. We can take this down there and that helps us sort of remember what we saw here. That's the main difference between these gardens, but they're both trial gardens. They're both here primarily to review plants and trial them. Again, this trial will be 6 years for the hydrangeas. For herbaceous things like hellebores, it's just a 4-year trial. One of the exciting things that's happening in the trial garden this year, it started last year, it's this year, and will continue going forward, is we're starting to monitor officially and scientifically monitor pollinators that are on specific plants. Right here we've got Hydrangea arborescens Haas's halo, which has one of the largest inflorescences. It is a single, so that has more flowers that pollinators might be interested in. So this pollinator project is, we have observers from our science staff and pollinator experts who are monitoring not only what insects are on the bee, how long they're on the bee, how long they're on the plant, and whether they're bees, flies, butterflies, or whatever. And what we found is in this trial so far, for 2 years now, Haas's halo attracts the most pollinators during its bloom cycle. Second most is actually the pink Incredible Spirit 2, which we looked at a little earlier. Those are the two that have been right at the top of the list. So we'll continue to do this. We've done it with Baptisia. We'll continue to do it with all native plants, and periodically we'll throw in some non-natives because I think it's good to know that as well. Um, so this takes our sort of casual observations of insects and types of insects to a much better level, and I think really informs what are really top-notch pollinator plants. So data collection in the field is done by iPads. Um, the beauty of the iPad is that it's connected to the internet, so it's all in real time. There's no going to the office, uploading, everything's here. But the major thing I love about this is that we can take a picture and attach it to any point, any data point we want. If we wanted to say green leaf, we can take a picture of that leaf. It's a further documentation that, especially over time, as we remember, we're trying to remember how a trial really did. This is a great way for us to, really remember what we were looking at. So right here, I'm looking at these heucheras, and these are heucheras on the Summer Haze series. And these were selected and bred for flower production and cut flowers as well. And they can get big, tall inflorescences and just stunning, just green leaves, very pretty green leaves. But what I'm taking note of here is that every single flower stem has been chewed down by a rabbit. In this garden, well, in both gardens, rabbits are a major thing. In this garden, they're probably living right under this hedge. So they don't have to go far, but that's not something we've necessarily seen on the other heucheras in the trial that have been selected for their foliage, but also flower. But on these, as soon as they were at full bloom, the rabbits came along and just took them down. So one of the things that we don't like to do in the trial garden is protect the plants from a pest or a disease. The idea is that we want the plants to survive and thrive without any input from us. But here's an example of a time when I said, if we keep letting the rabbits eat these plants, we'll never get any data on these plants. So we surrounded these small euonymus shrubs with chicken fence last year, hoping that it would spur them to regrow. But I think that repeated rabbit browsing just was too much. The plants gave it up. They're all dead. We have replacements coming. And likely I will put them right back in the cage just to make sure they're here for us to see. So in our gardens, our goal is to do nothing. We think the average homeowner will water, we hope. We can't really expect them to necessarily do more. So our concept here is to do not much after they're established. So we plant the plants, we keep them watered so they're fully established. We then water as needed by looking at the soil moisture and determining if they need any water. So no additional moisture unless needed. We do mulch. We mulch for not only aesthetic, but for water conservation and theoretically for weed suppression. I'm not sure that's always the case. We do not deadhead unless we're doing a deadhead study where we want to see how deadheading affects rebloom. We don't divide. We don't stake. We don't do any insect or disease control. So no sprays. We've never sprayed in these gardens. And we don't do any winter protection. So for example, here, these are sort of shrub-like crepe myrtles that were bred in Michigan that should be fully hardy for us. And you can see this is about what they do. They're not super big, but you can also see there's a lot of spots where they just died out. So this last winter was not a great winter. Despite not really having hardiness issues in the past, we're seeing some hardiness issues. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at perhaps a reduction in vigor over repeated winters, especially where they've gotten small, especially in the case of these really small ones. We'll monitor to see if they ever catch up. Maybe not this year, but next year. But no winter protection. So we don't winter mulch, and we don't provide any type of windbreak. We're looking at natural windbreaks like these yew hedges to do the job. So we've left the trial gardens and we're now in our production facility. And what we're looking at right now are the stock plants for our Agastache trial. So these are the plants that over the course of this year and the following year, we will take cuttings from these plants to produce the new crop for spring of 2026 and spring of 2027. We don't we typically buy in a lot of our plants or we get the full trial donated. So we try to start the plants with similar size, similar aged plants. Sometimes we can't, especially with specialty nurseries and specialty plants. But in a case like this, that's a big part of that trial is we want these to start like if you went into a garden center in the spring, this is the plant you would buy. It's a 4-inch pot. This is what you would get. You're now going to grow it like an annual. So we do want to start here rather than with buying these in every year. It also saves on cost. But typically we buy stuff in or if we grow it from seed, our production facilities grow that as well. Some of these were grown from seed to produce the stock plants that will then ultimately continue the project for 2 more years. One of the things that we do in our plant evaluation program is evaluate plants that have been developed by our plant breeder or plant breeders, whether it's our previous plant breeder, Dr. Jim Walt, or our current plant breeder, Dr. Justin Lombardoni. And that's what you're seeing here are plants that he has come up with and he's growing them out. We'll put them in our trial. If they do well and they do well at other sites they've been distributed to, then they stand a great chance of being introduced. And we introduce through our Chicagoland Grows program, which we do in conjunction with Plants Nouveau. They help us market our plants to the industry as well as the gardening public. So we're back in the office and we can look at this in the field, but sometimes it's easier to just do it on our PC. When we're back in the office, we can look at the plants that we just evaluated. What's great about this database, it gives you all the basic accession information, but this shows you all of the various data points that we've taken. So in this case, last time we looked at this, we looked at whether they are flowering. At that point, there were 60% of that plant was in bloom. And so then that can be borne out by looking at the photograph. Not the best photos because there's a lot of shade comes in from the top beams, but that gives us that visual that's on top of the words. And if we feel the need, like what I did here, was just note that it was past peak, just so I understand it's 60%, but that's not 60% going to 100. That's 60% going to 0. But at the same time, we mentioned that it was had an excellent visual display. So we take into account the habit form, take into account its health, the quantity of flowers, the quality of the flowers, and then we basically put a rating on that is like from poor to excellent, basically saying this plant has done really well or is looking really good right now. And of course, we want to follow that up with a picture because a photo is worth a lot, not only right now, but in a year or two when we're writing up the results, or if someone comes to us and says, how'd that plant do? We can do that. A lot of these plants, for instance, this group of clematis come from a cooperator, someone who has said, we will give you plants for your trial if you let us know how they did. And so we do that an annual follow-up with our collaborators to let them know how their plants are doing. So when all is said and done, we will publish our information. We're always talking, we're always giving tours, we're always, letting people know about what's happening in our trials. But we still think publishing is probably the main thing that reaches people. And publishing also to me means social media. So on our website, under the plant evaluation program, it talks about our program. It talks about a lot of the stuff I've talked about today. Um, and then we get into our studies. So, for instance, there's our latest plant evaluation notes, which is our in-house publication. And this is the report that basically gives you every bit of detail about that trial you can imagine, and often way more than probably anyone wants. But what it does is it lays out all the specifics of the trial and all the sort of things we saw in a very, sort of objective way. We're horticulturists, so it's hard not to be subjective, but this is where we just let people know this is what we saw. If you have similar conditions, you might see that. So we can then open that. I mean, a visitor can open that. And what we did last year, we started this web pages that sort of takes that PDF and sort of splits it apart into the various various areas of the thing. So we've got trial parameters, the evaluation report, top rated coneflowers, the evaluation details summary and appendix. And so you can just go down and read it like that. But if you want to take it home or print it out, you can just download the study as a PDF, and there it is. For years we printed these, and with printing costs the way they were, we decided we really needed to go to a PDF. And in this case, what used to be maybe a 4 or 6 page, really condensed report can now be pretty much unlimited. I mean, this coneflower trial is actually 17 pages long. So it's given us an opportunity to share even more, but even more importantly, have more photographs. That the more photographs everybody gets, I think the happier we are. Now, also on our website, we have the fine gardening articles. This has been a wonderful project for us. I remember when Danielle Sherry approached me, I think it's 14 years now, 14 years ago. And she said, could you do, a few articles for us for a couple of years? And we have now been doing them since 2011. And we've got some in the hopper for this year and for next year. But these have been wonderful because they open the base of who gets this. The readership of the magazine is largely gardeners, so it reaches a whole new audience. And we do publish those on our website. So if you go under the Fine Gardening Magazine tab, you'll see all of the articles we've written as PDFs. So we've made it 2 years ago. This was a really static list of links, and last year had a marketer, one of our graphic artists, who said this can be prettier, and so she put this together. It's a really nice visual, but it gives all of those articles are available to the whoever's looking for it. What I love about these articles is that they not only talk about a trial, maybe one that's going on right now, but they may update a trial that we did earlier, and it may be a preview of what's to come. So it kind of gives us a little bit of more real-time information on that. We have an Instagram account. It's at Plant Evaluators. We can then do whatever we want to do, whether it be highlight a plant or give an update of a whole trial. This is truly real time. These are those flowering heuchera I mentioned earlier. See how beautiful they are? I mean, they were just in full bloom. So the rabbits took those down to nothing. This is a great vehicle for us to be even more current than the magazine or our web pages. So our trials are open to the public. I would invite everyone to come visit us. You can get information on coming to the garden at chicagobotanic.org. But once you're on the property, you can take a leisurely stroll down through the display gardens, cross the trellis bridge, and you're into the evaluation gardens. It's all open to the public. Everything you've seen today is accessible to anyone who stops by. If you're in a hurry, come down our East Road. It's a straight shot from the parking lots into the trial gardens. But any way you can get here, we're happy to have you.